I'm so glad you brought this up because I think this is something that I did want to talk about really, and it has to do with stop eating 3 hours before bed for that very reason. So there was even a new study, but there's been several studies now really showing that this is important for that cardiovascular reset, right? Your parasympathetic activity is supposed to go higher. You're in your rest and recovery phase, right? When you're eating food, that's the sympathetic activity, right? That's activating the sympathetic nervous system.
As you're eating. Yeah.
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 And even as you're digesting. So you have to think about it. Like you digest it, what it takes like 5 or so hours to fully finish about.
Yeah, depending on the meal. Yeah.
Depending on the meal. Right. So if you're eating, right before you go to bed, you are not in that parasympathetic activity, part of the cycle that you want to be in. So there was a new study that I shared, like, I don't know, a couple days ago, even showing that if you stop eating 3 hours before bed, so these people were actually, it's interesting, they had their blood pressure measured for starting in the mid-afternoon all the way throughout the night. This is the first study that really, not just one endpoint looking at blood pressure, but just measuring it continuously. I don't know if it was every 15 minutes or something like that, but it was found that during sleep, if they had stopped eating 3 hours before bed versus the group that did not stop eating 3 hours before bed, their blood pressure dipped like lower. So you get that baroreflex dipping, right? So this is like part of the parasympathetic activation. As you know, very important for the blood pressure to go down. Heart rate went down like, much, much lower. And that reset is so, so important for cardiovascular health. I think what was found was it was something like translated to like 20% lower risk of cardiovascular events, like heart attacks. So it's really pretty significant. Yeah. And it really is an easy thing to do, to think about stopping eating, 3 hours before you go to bed. Like that's something I think that is not that hard to implement. Mm-hmm. And it will improve your sleep as well as your cardiovascular health. Although I think in that study, I don't know that sleep was it was subjective, and I don't think it really was improved more. But other studies have found that as well, that sleep does improve. I know Sachin Panda, he's been on my podcast, your podcast, he's had studies showing that it seemed like stop eating 3 hours before bed really does seem to improve sleep. But this parasympathetic activation, you don't want to have a meal right before you bed because you want to be in the rest and recovery part, right? Mm-hmm. So
yeah, I think people hear, and I understand why the nomenclature and the buzzwords of fight or flight for sympathetic and rest and digest for parasympathetic, but yeah, the evidence shows eating stimulates the sympathetic nervous system. Yeah. It's not a stress event, but it requires energy. Anything that requires energy raises body temperature, and your body's doing work.
It's an awake event. It's an awake. Right. You don't eat while you're sleeping, and then not eating at night. So there's all these studies that have come out of Israel. I think is it Jacobitz and Freud? They're two researchers. Sachin Panda, I remember years ago, showed me one of the studies. It was like published in Science, showing that if you have the same exact meal, same calorie intake, same composition, macronutrient composition in the morning, the afternoon, in the evening, the insulin response is different. Like you're the most insulin sensitive early in the morning. As you start to go towards the evening, and particularly 3 hours before your natural bedtime, your melatonin levels naturally rise, right? And as you know, melatonin is important for the onset of sleep and preparing the body for sleep, but it's also preparing the other organs for rest and recovery, including the pancreas, which is making insulin. And so you're not making as much insulin when it's closer to your natural bedtime because of the melatonin levels that are rising. And so you don't want to be eating, particularly a carbohydrate-rich meal, but a meal, you're not going to be as insulin sensitive.
In the last 3 hours before sleep.
Yeah, when you're starting to get into that melatonin rising phase of, of your cycle.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think when people hear, okay, you're most insulin sensitive in the morning, that would be the time to eat your biggest meal. But then people say, wait, but then I'm trying to fast and I'm trying to exercise, and like, how do I do this? I think that's where, for them, the confusion comes in. And to me, it's very simple. Just because your insulin sensitivity is highest first thing in the morning doesn't mean you have to eat right away. It just means avoid eating too close to bedtime, right? Sometime during the day. And also, if you exercise fasted or after a small snack. It was kind of interesting when Stacey Sims said, not everyone should exercise fasted. She said, especially a lot of women don't like to do that. She didn't say eat a meal. She said, like, have a scoop of whey protein with I think she said with like some almond milk in it. And you couldn't believe the response on the internet. It was like vindication, right? And I get it. It was like, it vindicated people's experience. Like, oh, thank you. And it told me something really important about the kind of sociology of what we do, which is when something validates people's experience, they love it. But it doesn't mean that the things that work for other people don't work. And I think that that's the part that gets lost. And so if a study shows that insulin sensitivity is highest in the morning, but you can only exercise first thing in the morning, what do? So you do the best you can.